Welcome to Dialogues from the President's Corner. I'm your host, Rosemary Pliven, along with Dr. Lawrence Zarda, president of Greensboro College. When we think of calling a lawyer, you probably start to think the worst, right? But having a good lawyer on your team is like getting regular checkups at the doctor. As a small college, Greensboro College wants to stay healthy for our students, faculty, and staff, and alumni. So we have one of the best lawyers in the country consulting with us. Elizabeth Troutman is partner with Brooks Pierce and counsel to Greensboro College. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We are so glad to have you. Okay, this is the hardest question we're going to give you. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a North Carolina native, grew up here, actually in Charlotte, and always had an interest in education. And actually taught for a little bit after college, went to college at Princeton, and then decided that I really wanted to be a lawyer and serve schools. So I represent colleges, universities, K-12 schools, public, private, just anything affecting education. So that's what I do.
Okay, so that's your work life, right? But first, first a question about your work life, though. Did you jump straight from law school into education, to working in education law? I mean, was that, or did you have any other things along the way that kind of said, no, not this, or?
Well, after college, I worked at a nonprofit that represents children and did development work for them. So, and then I went to law school. And when I came to Brooks Pierce, our model at our firm is that we do all kinds of law before sort of settling into a practice area. So I knew I was going to end up in education law, but, I litigated a secure transactions jury trial and things like that for a couple years.
And so, but now you're where you want to be.
Exactly.
All right. And a little bit more about you, your person, what you like to do.
What? Personal life?
Yeah. You don't have to go too deep if you don't want to.
No, I have two kids. They are 14 and 11. My husband and I have been married for 17 years, and we moved here with the idea of just raising our kids here in Greensboro, and we just absolutely love Greensboro.
Yeah, same. All right, that was the hardest question. You get the easy
one. It was really
hard.
In general, why do you think that colleges and universities require constant legal counsel?
Well, lots of reasons. If you're really serious about the rule of law, you need a lawyer to sort of explain what the laws are and stay compliant with the laws. There are so many different laws that impact colleges, local, state, federal, and they're changing pretty constantly. And the other thing that a lawyer does is, you, Dr. Zarda, is sort of the captain of the ship. You're steering the ship. But my job is to kind of let you know where the icebergs are and how big they might be, or if you've got a leak in the boat. And so it's really a preventative thing to be a thought partner with the college president or the superintendent or whoever's leading the organization. And then the other thing is that as educational institutions, a lot of what you are doing is managing a lot of different people, and you want to model fairness for them and treat everybody on your campus fairly. That can be hard to do when people kind of come into conflict with different issues. And so that's one of the things that lawyers can provide is sort of what are some processes that we can implement to make sure that everybody is treated fairly and can be successful.
And I would probably add for listeners is that by almost any definition, higher education has become a highly regulated industry. I mean, up there with healthcare or banks or airlines or whatever, the number of local, state, and federal regulations that all colleges have to abide by is really rather breathtaking, actually.
I think it would be interesting to know a little bit more about Greensboro College, how it's governed. A fully independent private institution, not part of any other public or private entity, operates as a 501c3 organization. With that, can you talk a little bit, Dr. Zarda, about how the college is governed, the role of the board of trustees, the president, and other officers?
And Rosemary, you already said that probably the most important part is we're truly independent. We are not part of any other organization. We may be a member of the North Carolina Independent Colleges, or we have an affiliation with the United Methodist Church, but the college is truly independent. The Board of Trustees, by bylaw, can be up to 40 members. Right now we have, I believe it's 28, about 24 very active, because we have a couple of ex officio appointees, and they are truly the governing board, and they are self-appointed. There is no outside entity that appoints anyone or reappoints anyone to the board. The board essentially has three direct reports, and that is the president, general counsel, and independent auditor. And so Elizabeth and I are two of the three that report directly to the board, although we work together all the time. In terms of how we interact with people, the other piece of the puzzle here is that we have to generate every single dollar that we need to operate the college. When I speak to Rotary or Kiwanis or whatever, and if I get the question, well, Dr. Zarda, how much support do you get from the city or the county, state, federal government? I don't take long to compute that number because it is zero. We get no direct funding from any outside source. Students can choose to use the federal or state financial aid for which they qualify here, but it is their choice, if you will, dirty word in education, like a voucher. But we have to be self-sufficient. And so that is another reason why legal counsel is so important to an independent institution like Greensboro College, because if we, for whatever reason, find ourselves in some sort of a pinch legally, we can't depend on any other organization. We have to handle it ourselves.
Okay. So, yeah, along those lines, I know you work with a number of colleges, educational organizations. So, what are some of the things that come up, the questions that you get time and time again?
Sure. Well, education law is interesting because you hit so many different things. There's corporate governance, there's real estate, there's employment, there's students' rights, there's contracts, there's athletics has its own regulatory scheme. The thing that seems to come up a lot lately is just changes in the federal landscape and federal regulations. There have just been significant changes over the last couple years, not just including the last couple months. And so how do we stay on top of all of that? When there are issues with students or staff where there's a conflict between, two individuals, or even a balance that needs to be struck between, free speech and safety. Those are the types of issues that come up time and again, trying to navigate, what's fair, what's lawful, and what is going to work for the particular institution.
I'm thinking that a lot about knee-jerk reactions that so many of us have when we hear things, and when I've heard you speak in meetings and how you say, well, let's go back to the law and let's really look at what this means before we react. We need to really know where it's coming from and know the history of it, and how to move forward in the legal correct way.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think working with an institution, it's not something where you're going to jump and change everything you do all of a sudden. You need to be thinking big picture and not just, how am I going to react to this particular situation? So I really like to go back to fundamental principles quite a bit in thinking about, well, why is, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, for example, why is that here? What's the spirit behind that particular statute? Then all of the regulation and our compliance with it can stem from just that principle of that particular law.
A lot of times I'm getting questions too from families. It's admission season and so on, and there's a lot of concern about what the next couple of years might look like. What advice would you give to a degree, our faculty and staff, but especially our families, in terms of what should they be paying attention to as far as changes in higher education law, and what maybe they could leave aside and not worry about?
Yeah, I mean, every administration is going to have some changes in the guidance that they give in their approach and in their sort of regulatory focus and priorities. And so there's a lot of discussion right now about there have been a lot of executive orders and what do they mean. But I do think it's important to remember that not one branch of government sets the laws in our country. We have three branches. And so one statement here doesn't necessarily mean all that much until, it gets implemented and goes through various branches. So all of the sort of back and forth about different issues, particularly like DEI or things like that, are something we should all pay attention to, but maybe not something to focus on if I were a family. The bigger picture issue for families, I think, is going to be whether or not federal student loans are still available, and how long they'll be available, because that's going to impact everybody in terms of whether they can afford to go to college and what that looks like for each family. And that is a really big deal. And it's not decided yet. The executive branch doesn't have the authority just to make wholesale decisions about that. And so that'll be an ongoing conversation between those three branches. But that could change in the next couple months.
Elizabeth, I'm reassured that when I get those questions in admissions open house, I give your answer. Pay attention to financial aid. That's the one that's most direct. Right now, there's nothing we're seeing that would impact us directly at Greensboro College, but we have to monitor it day by day.
Well, and that's always the question I know that parents have anyway. It always comes
How can
back
I
to the
afford
money,
college,
right?
right?
How can I afford college? And students too, not just parents. So what is your favorite part about working with Greensboro Colleges, with working with colleges?
I just am a nerd. I love school. And so, my favorite part of the year is August or late August, early fall. Everybody's getting ready, and all of the hope that comes from realizing that all these students are going to be coming into your buildings and learning new things and opening doors for their future and exploring new ideas. And that makes, all of the little things and all the boring regulations that I have to read worth it. Because, these institutions don't just exist, on a daily basis. They are bigger picture. And so being part of the mission is what I love.
We are lucky to have you as part of our college and just so grateful to have your guidance and your light that you bring to so many issues. So thank you.
And I would assure everyone who may be listening that the Board of Trustees and the President fully agree. Brooks Pierce has been our counsel for quite some time, but we've worked with Elizabeth for over a decade now.
Wow.
And there's a level of trust that's very important.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for spending some time with us today. We appreciate you. Thank you for spending some time with us as well. Be sure to subscribe to Greensboro College Dialogues from the President's Corner wherever you watch or you listen. Learn more about all the good things happening at the college by following us on social media at Greensboro College or online at greensboro.edu.